Welcome all to our latest installment of Rebels of the Heart. We are thrilled to be with you today with this amazing group of people and leaders who are near and dear to my heart. So we're going to be getting started officially in just a few moments. Thank you to each of our panelist guests today and my co-moderator for this special episode, Carson Kelly. And we're going to be jumping into it in just a few moments. Thanks for being here. Okay, again, and welcome to Rebels with a Heart. The topic today is bringing compassion into the workplace. This group here, joined by my colleagues, Carson Kelly as our moderator, Lori Hanau, Shannon Teixeira, and Jeff Jacobs. Really honored to have all of you here. So in just a moment, we're going to do the introductions. And again, Lori, thank you for being here on Rebels of the Heart today on this important topic.
Thank you for guiding me with the introductions. It's so wonderful to be here with you, Derek, and you, Carson, and of course with Shannon and Jeff. It's such a privilege. And just to say that I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and I worked within our manufacturing company with my father for about 10 years. And I think I've been very shaped in my whole life, actually, by that period and by how he led with such care and such dignity, and how each of us blossomed in his presence. And I went on to become president and chief operating officer of a ceramics manufacturing company. And there, and when I was in sales and many other places, I just experienced so much soul loss in organizations, and it's guided me. Why was our manufacturing company and my dad's leadership so rare? Why isn't that more the norm? And then I just want to add that back in about 2000 to 2002, I feel like I got really cracked open. I think a normal growth spurt of consciousness. But the future and I became very good friends, and I do feel like I saw these times. And I started to write frameworks for how we can share leadership and share power and meaning and responsibility with each other. And in our practices, it starts with care. Everything, if we don't care, game over. And so I have a company, Global Roundtable Leadership, I've had for 23 years. And I'm a single mom of two beautiful sons, and I live in Keene, New Hampshire, in the southwestern corner of the state. And again, the privilege of meeting you all at the Compassion 2.0 gathering. Carson, thank you so much, and to be here with all of you today.
It's a blessing to have you here, Lori. Thank you for sharing and welcome officially. Shannon, going over to you for introduction. Welcome. Welcome back, Rebels of the Heart. You're one of the few return panelists here. So.
Yes, and so much gratitude, and thank you, Derek, for just all of your generosity and creating this platform and bringing so many amazing people together to share and shape in how we can change the world for the better. I think very similar to Lori, in an environment of opportunity, and knowing that we do have that opportunity to shape the way that we care for one another in such a deep, deep way. So thank you again for having me. So Shannon Teixeira, I'm a People Solutions Director for Waste Management. And I love to think about my role as a architect of employee experience around unlocking the potential of people. When I think about that, it's really creating environments for people to be and do their best work, and just feel a deep, deep calling to that space. And in fact, similarly to Lori, had been in an environment where it was absolutely the converse, and knew there had to be a better way. There had to be something more to the way that we connected and supported and cared for our people. And so that truly became my mission, and feel like I am a person who gets to live through my purpose and my mission to continue to unlock potential and bring joy and care to work. So I'm just thrilled to be here. Very excited to be part of this conversation with so many beautiful people. So thank you.
Awesome. We're grateful to have you here, Shannon. And coming over to you, Jeff Jacobs. Welcome to Rebels of the Heart.
Yeah, I'm intimidated right out of the gate. I'm seeing Shannon brought her, her fan club with her in the chat. So that's wonderful to see. No, I'm excited to be with everybody today. I'm Jeff Jacobs. I've had a career in human resources over 30 years, last 20 of which have been in technology in San Jose. I'm calling in from the 18th floor of our brand new tower in downtown San Jose. And as soon as I hang up from this conversation, I'm going to walk across the hall and facilitate a session for some of our leaders. My role at Adobe is that I am an internal consultant is the best way to describe it. I am an executive coach and facilitator for executives in one of our businesses here at Adobe, and focusing on leadership development, change management, communication, all of the above. And so many of it comes down to how do we create a safe space to have some of those difficult conversations. And outside of work, I'm on the board of a couple of wonderful nonprofits. I'm active with music, prison, and retreat ministry, and the father of 2 adult sons, and I've been married to my wonderful wife for 31 years.
Amazing. Well, welcome, Jeff. We're excited to have you. No need to be intimidated. You're going to be amazing.
He's not intimidated.
Yeah.
He's just humble.
Yes, thank you. And to my friend and co-host today, Carson Kelly. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. Want to echo just some of the things that Shannon had said. Just thank you, Derek, and to the broader Life Guides team for putting this platform together and for reaching so many people who are doing so many fantastic things in the world. I always enjoy learning about these incredible people that are unbeknownst to me until they show up on your podcast. So awesome. Thank you. I've been in technology for, my first startup was in 1998, and I've been in enterprise software for many years thereafter. About 5 years ago or so, I had a series of experiences, and I decided to flip my professional focus into scaling compassion. So to that end, I've set up a company that is a platform for acts of altruism. I've co-founded another company that's around the neuroscience of compassion. And most recently, I've been working on Compassion 2.0, which is really a professional learning community, again, trying to scale compassion through creating compassion architecture around organizational experiences for employees, and also around product experiences for consumers or others. And we kind of loosely define product. But anyway, so along the lines of trying to scale compassion, I'm trying to put the rest of my professional career, so to speak, to that end. So it's great to be here. I have 3 lovely daughters, and I have a wonderful wife of 26 years, and also I'm on several boards outside of work. So anyway, it's a little bit about me. So thank you for having me. Appreciate being here.
Awesome. It's great to have you here. And again, Derek Lunston, President and Chief Culture Officer of Life Guides and host of Rebels of the Heart. And again, Life Guides is a platform that connects people who have been through life experiences, events, or challenges to offer direct compassion, empathy, resources, and support to those going through that same experience, event, or challenge in their lives, creating healthier families, lives, and communities. And this topic is near and dear. And this episode is very special. One, it's the first episode we've ever had a co-host. And that's relative to the topic at hand, which is how we've all come together in this community of creating containers of caring, cultures of caring, and more compassionate organizations and a more compassionate world as a result of that. And the important thing to mention is that the individuals on this call are part of a broader community that was at this event that Carson initiated called Compassion 2.0 just about a month and a half ago at the Mount Madonna Center. And we had the chance to spend a couple of days together, really going deep on what is compassion as an essential aspect, and then what is compassion as it's applied to the business world and to organizations where we serve. And so that was a very special experience for all of us, and it was representative of a number of other leaders, practitioners, and supporters and advocates of this work. And I think that any of them, frankly, could be here on the stage, but this is just a microcosm of that. And so I wanted to give people, and we wanted to give people, a glimpse into what that seed is and what we're building together in that community. So with that, Carson, I'd love for you to just share a little bit from your perspective on what was the inspiration of Compassion 2.0? What was that event itself for you? What was the kind of gathering and intention behind that, and your vision of how this group of leaders and the marriage, if you will, of the Rebels of the Heart and Life Guides community, what does that look like as we operationalize compassion, empathy at scale?
Yeah. So thanks, Derek. So Compassion 2.0 originally came together as a result of my first startup that I was working on for platform for acts of altruism. I had a number of advisors who were willing to help me figure out how to motivate people to act in a compassionate and altruistic fashion that isn't tied to dopamine addictive loops. And that's a hard thing to do. But we had some brilliant people come together, started to put some amazing ideas on the table, and then COVID happened. So we had originally had a retreat idea in mind and some other podcasting that we started, but again, got derailed. That being said, now that we're post-COVID, things have come back together. We're continuing the initiative. I think the biggest thing that at the time that really kicked it off and clarified for me was around issues around the Me Too movement, around Black Lives Matter, around continued political and cultural division, and just seeing this splitting of our human population. And it's just completely unnecessary in my mind. There's far more that binds us together than does separate us. So to that end, thinking about compassionate activities, particularly as they've been validated now by scientific research, there's lots of brilliant neuroscientists out there doing amazing work. So seeing that validation made me realize, like, we need to bring this together. And part of the conversation also came from being able to connect with a fellow named Scott Shute, who probably a lot of you know or have heard of at least, did brilliant work at LinkedIn as the first director, I believe this is his title, Director of Mindfulness and Compassion. And he and I got to talking about various things. And what became clear to me was that compassion traditionally has been thought of as an individual virtue taught in a non-secular framework, which is a very important thing and needs to continue to happen. But through the study of the science and the validation of it, I've noticed that compassion is now switching over from a non-secular to a secular framework, and from an individual virtue to an organizational principle. And it's just starting. And that's why I call it Compassion 2.0. So in the effort of trying to explore what that looks like, I've had the opportunity to connect with a lot of amazing people, particularly Derek, with the work that you guys have been doing at Life Guides, because Life Guides, of course, is an explicitly compassionate company. So there just makes a lot of sense to start to harness, I think, what's bubbling up in different pockets, if you will, in the organizational landscapes, to start to unify and bring people together and make compassion as an operational principle, something formal, and also to uncover the ROI reasons as to why to do so. So I don't know if all of that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much that we can unpack there, and so we're gonna do that in this conversation. But I will expand the conversation to our guests here and say, what was it that really drew you each to this community, to that event, to this work? I'd love for you to just share each of your individualized perspectives on that particular aspect, since this is such a kind of a nascent and expanding community, right? So any one of you can take that question. There's no order here. There's no rules.
I'm happy to step in. You know, again, I think some of it is the shock every time I hear anyone say this is nascent. And again, I'm living in this society. I know that this is so, and yet I always get a jolt of how can this be so? And yet I understand there are many reasons for it. We certainly know not only the brain science, but Gallup and McKinsey and others that have done the data on how sick we are at work, and how toxic our workplaces can be. And I've led, through our work at Global Roundtable Leadership, we offer these learning journeys, and how often even executive leadership teams, when they share their stories, when they have the space to actually share their stories and lead with their humanity with each other before their roles, how common it is to find out that each person has had trauma of some kind in the workplace. And the shock of leadership teams actually never actually really hearing each other's human stories, how surprised I am at that, like that the time is not taken in the workplace. And the structure of power over and under actually keeps us from some of those practices in that time in the workplace. And so it's like water in the desert for me to like when I met Carson, and Carson and I started talking a couple of years ago and have talked regularly. And then when he started this Compassion 2.0, like I would just wanted to run. I didn't need a plane to come from the East Coast. Because, again, like Shannon said, my commitment to this with my life and to us, the genius of who we are that comes out through our humanity and our care that is untapped. I mean, to know how untapped this is in the workplace and in the genius of who we are in our teams and as groups, and what happens when we start to lead from compassion and care with each other, and how time after time after time after time I've seen the roof come off of organizations and companies in short periods of time who begin to practice with intention. So that's why I'm here
Awesome.
and why I care to come.
Thanks, Lori.
So much of what you shared, Lori, resonates with me. The water in the desert analogy. So much of the work that I do, I mentioned talking about creating a safe environment. The foundation. We're probably all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we need our air, our water, and our food. And from a corporate standpoint, it's safety and trust. And when I try to unpack that and say, what does that mean? What does that look like? I start getting into issues of vulnerability. I start getting into issues of inclusion. And if we dig deeper than that, we start getting into issues of compassion and giving people permission to engage in those conversations. The reactions I see is the water in the desert reaction. I started my compassion journey just about 3 years ago through the Applied Compassion Training program. It's offered through Stanford University. And my capstone program, because I'm a facilitator, was to put together a workshop, Compassion 101, and see what it would be like, how well would it be received in a corporate environment. And my goal was to get it in front of 100 people. Well, within a relatively short period of time, I had surpassed 1,000 people. And to me, that's not indicative of anything special that I did. It was because of the receptivity and how much people wanted to engage in that. Because to your point, I've worked for some phenomenal companies, Adobe being one of them, and still there is dysfunction that's built into any organization that is shaped like a pyramid. We're in competition with one another, and there's some dysfunction that's baked in. So when we can stop polarizing and get to a point of assuming good intent and finding that middle ground, it's really those compassion skills that we're fostering.
I love that, Jeff. And I think for me, very similar to what Lori and Jeff both have shared. When I really think about the why, it's the humanistic part of the challenge that I think so many of us have faced, and coming up through work, that there's a work self and a home self. And somehow, we've got to break this self apart. And as the world has changed and social systems have changed, that doesn't work anymore. I think it's a narrative that is just false, and asking people to trade off parts of themselves in order to show up at work, to be productive and to do things at work is just not realistic. And so for me, a guiding light is around how do we create work conditions that, like Jeff mentioned, create a space of safety, allowing all of us to be authentic in a way that works for all of us, to connect in a deeper way, to do the work that we're here to do, but also allows us to have a sense of being seen, heard, respected, valued, and supported through all of the conditions that we have at work and all of the things that occur at work. And it's challenging. And it's new. A lot of this is new. I mean, I think, I resonate, Jeff, with what you're saying, and it's new because we're evolving in our way as human beings, technology advancements, right? Social systems, like I mentioned. And, how do we as leaders, as visionaries of a future, and as participants show up in a way in which is towards the betterment of ourselves and each other? And for me, understanding that at a very deep level is frankly why I was so excited and just honored to be included in Compassion 2.0, and certainly the work, Carson, that you're leading is incredibly important. So that's why I'm here.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And there's just one other thing I'd like to add. The evolution of and I think the realization, both the remembering and the evolution of our humanity, the call of our times, AI. I mean, there's so many different ways we could go. The pandemic, so many things that are bringing up the call of our humanity, and how in sector over sector, because had the privilege of working across all the sectors. There is this rise in each sector for our humaneness and the call to our humanity in how we work, and thinking first in our commitment to our humanity in what we create. I want to name that, and I think it's so interesting, and I believe it was the Gen X actually generation that's the largest subgroup in our human history for those who care about values in the workplace and will not settle. And Gen Z has amplified that, like, will not settle for a lack of humanity and a lack of care and a lack of the quality of relationship and meaning and responsibility in the workplace. And just, again, all the different ways that our society and the world and the earth is pushing on us and our evolution. The other thing I just want to name is the call to safety, I believe, is in union with the call to bravery. And actually going first, stepping in first, using ourselves to be committed, to be embodied, and to walk our talk in being vulnerable, especially if we have an executive role in an organization, so that we start to create the field, to share the space, to make it safe for others to be vulnerable and to be brave. And the heart, right? The bravery of the heart, right? The courage. And so I just want to name bravery along with safety in the cultivation of our hearts and our capacity to care and to find our compassion, which also then we can find our deeper wisdom and with each other there.
Lori, what you just described was foundational, as you can imagine, to Rebels of the Heart. Like that was an essential aspect of the work that, and what you just described, of how that applies. I also want to just share, again, as a reminder to your point, remembering what happened in that container when we were together, but also for the group to have some perspective. When we were at Compassion 2.0, for most of the time, outside of we were different small group breakouts, we were sat in a circle, right? I think it's important for the audience to imagine that, because to the point around, we're all co-moderating this, we're all co-sharing our view and co-creating this experience. And in that space as well, we were all together as peers, as equals, sharing our heart, sharing our lens, sharing our view, sharing our ideas, learning from each other, and literally looking in each other's eyes and experiencing that deeper connection that so often is, to your point, Jeff. I reason I bring it in, so you talked about the pyramid, you talk about the linear nature of how we've done business over the last several decades, and to your point, Lori, about where things are moving in this more whole, complete, fully seen, integrated experience that we're now creating. And that's part of, I think, what the work that we're doing here. And so I wanted to just kind of remind everybody and get that lens, particularly as we think about, as we create new opportunities to connect and to do this work within organizations. That's I think an element. We even did some intentional work naming that at the session. Maybe one of you wants to talk a little bit about that exercise or how that landed for you. But I think that might be helpful to even just give some voice to now. So
The circle work.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff or Shannon, do you want to speak first? I want to.
Please go ahead, Lori.
So I've had the privilege of being trained in circle work over the last 25 years, and actually do this exercise that was done. And Carson, would you name the couple? Their work is so incredible. And I
Jared and Ann Side from Center for Counsel. They do counsel work. The circle is what I call a structure of compassion, in the sense like you put people in a circle, compassion happens, period. Like it just happens. So anyway, they've done brilliant work in prisons. And anyway, I can go on and on about that, but that Jared and Ann Side from Center for Counsel.
Right. And what they did with us, which is one of our practices here at Global Roundtable Leadership, when we go into organizations and academic settings, because we're so used to rows, like so they set up here we've been in a circle for, a day and 3/4, and anybody that goes to any gatherings, it's in a way similar to being in the hospital with someone who you love, who's shifting. Like these types of retreats, these situations put us in a different kind of time. And so it was amazing that it was a day and a half and not a month and a half that we were all together, right? And when they came in, they restructured. We'd been sitting in circles the whole time. We started in circle, and we began all together, getting all of our voices in with this. So we started with intention and this consciousness of care and connection and building quality relationships. And so then they put us into rows. And even though I knew this exercise, I found myself like, so antsy while we're sitting in the rows. And then we had the chance to move ourselves back in a circle, and the relief, and then the profoundness of how much deeper we went with their first exercise of asking, which I've never done this, asking each of us to share the meaning of our first names. And I do believe that there's something from going from the rows back into circle, and then into that intimacy of the ancestors, of the names that we were given and what meaning they had if we knew it. And I just want to say that in circle, there is not a culture that I know of across the globe, across time. None of us have ancestors who haven't sat in circle to solve challenges, to talk in peace, to build relationship, to vision and dream together. And so this is literally in our DNA. Is what happens when we move, Jeff, like what you said. Like I say, how do we put the circle on the pyramid? And that's how I'm always thinking. Shannon, I love what you say about it comes from design, right? Compassion, design, our practices is so important. And that design of circle, I'll step back to see what you both have to
Derek,
share.
what you invited us to talk about, and Lori, what you're elaborating on, is this concept of architecture. And we talked a little bit about architecture in our prep call. This idea about, what came to mind for me was a formal architecture and an informal architecture. And sitting in circle is a form of architecture. It's a form of how we come together. And I know that, for instance, our facilities organization and our food service organization, they don't think about buildings and meals. They think about creating experiences. So the rooms we sit in, what we hang on the wall, how we, engage with one another. And I think there's also an informal architecture that we were the benefactors of, and it's the silver lining of COVID. And that is that COVID provided us an opening to talk about that which we historically would not talk about. If we were on a conference call with someone, and heaven forbid our dog would interrupt or our child would run into the room, and we'd be mortified. And now it's commonplace. I was on meetings constantly with people's, had their pets in their lap, their kids in their lap, and we welcomed the interruptions, and we got a glimpse into people's homes. And more than that, we talked about what struggles people were facing in the process. There was a humanity that came out of that. And while I'm glad that we're getting a handle on COVID, I don't know if we'll ever see the end of things of this nature. I hope we never lose touch of the humanity that was opened up as a result of it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh my gosh, yes, I agree. And you know what, maybe what I'll add is within the construct of architecture and experience is the connectivity to how do we feel, right? Is that emotional connection and energetic connection that we have. And within every experience, we have a choice of how we want to respond or react. And I think the intentionality around what we've been talking about, and even back to just the resonance of this circle idea and feeling so connected without knowing that that connectivity was really going to create the feeling that it had for me. I had never really felt that immersed in a connection with people I had never met before, and had felt open enough to share information about myself personally in a way that didn't feel threatening. And again, I think it's important because all of these things that we consider as experiences evoke responses and our way of behaving. And those things are so important and to not be left behind, whether it's, like Jeff mentioned, something up on the wall, the way that seats are in a room, the way that we speak towards one another. Those are all interactions that have a significant impact on how we feel. And I think that's the piece that we've got to dive into more around how can we help and shape the way that people feel through support and other architectures as we move ahead.
Yes to everything said. And I just want to echo what you said there, Jeff, about, COVID giving a structure, or pandemic, giving a structure for all of us to be individually and collectively connected in this, and how we respond to those different experiences. And just to put it out there, compassion, in my opinion, is the through line. It's the thread to the future path, right? We need all this in order to move into the new models, the new designs, new organizations, the new systems that we can create in a different model, in a different world that we all aspirationally and remember experience together. So Carson, you want to speak a little bit about that? I know, or inquire about that. I know that's something that we've spent some time in, but I know it's something that is part of the vision for this work together in this community that's formed.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think that there's just so many different ways to approach this. I think to your larger point, though, Derek, that we're humans in a collective, an organization or any sort of effort trying to do something as a collective group of humans in some sort of structured organization is still humans at the end of the day. And the thing that strikes me the most is looking at kind of previous industrial model, kind of military command and control systems that we've come from that might have had a certain logic and effectiveness once upon a time to what I'm interpreting you describe, Derek, is this more flattened organization, more circular organizations, things that Lori and her team work on all the time. But in the sense of really unlocking human potentiality. And one of the things that's fascinating to me is constantly bumping into this notion of compassion as a soft skill. Oh, it's a soft skill and that's a nice to have and so forth. And it's like, it's a tactical strategic weapon. Like what don't you understand here? If at the end of the day, if a business is in the business of realizing shareholder value and or stakeholder value, I would argue, then to really achieve that, you want to unlock the beauty and the brilliance that are the individuals within your given organization and to give them the greatest possibility to thrive and survive. I mean, Google's Aristotle project, where they looked at flourishing and psychological safety and so forth, proved this. And that, there is a through line from people feeling safe and secure and their ability to innovate on existing problems, come up with new product ideas, et cetera, all of which translate to a higher return on investment and a bottom line. So I'm personally fascinated that as compassionate organizations and flourishing really comes to the fore, how do we really understand the true value, stakeholder value that will come as a result of really unlocking those relationships and moving from command and control to collaboration and deep empathy and support and so forth. So anyway, these are thoughts that have come to mind for me. Shannon and I actually were spending some time exploring some of this right prior to this call. So I would be curious if Jeff or Lori or Shannon or Derek, if you guys have any thoughts about that.
And about, no, Jeff, you go. I was asking a clarity point about, can you restate the question to us? Because I feel like
Sure,
you said so much,
sure.
I was filled. Sorry,
I would
Jeff.
just say very simply, compassion is not a soft skill. Compassion is a strategic capability that, if deployed, will unlock human potential and human capacity, particularly in relationship with other humans, which has a direct bottom line benefit to all stakeholders, not just shareholders, but stakeholders in a given organization and the community that they operate within, or communities they operate within. So I'm curious to know, just as people professionals, I mean, I'm just sitting on the sidelines in the sense, but you guys are in organizations, you are doing this work. So I'm curious to know, does that resonate with you, and or what do you see in your organizations, if that's even possible?
I'll push back on the notion of it not being a soft skill, Carson, and in the hope of standing up for soft skills, because I think soft skills get a bad rap. And when I think about what Lori shared, compassion, vulnerability, connection, communication, I mean, aren't these all soft skills? I mean, at the end of the day, if I ask most business people, if I'm on the agenda for an offsite, typically it's to do the HR stuff, the soft skill, and it's up to me to make the case in the time that I'm allotted that this is a value add. And I think there's tremendous power there. And it goes back, I reflect about Daniel Goleman, and emotional intelligence in some companies is still seen as a scary soft skill. But most enlightened companies will recognize that it's the foundation of success, that our IQ gets us in the doorway, but it's our EQ that differentiates us once we're there. That's what's going to differentiate us in our careers. And what it comes down to for me is, every time I'm in an engagement with an executive, we talk about what's the desired outcome. What are you solving for here? And then it comes down to accountability and incentives. What behaviors are you rewarding, and what are you holding people accountable for? And frequently we will talk about the soft skills as though they are imperative, and yet we don't create the incentives and the rewards and the accountability in order to put wood behind that arrow. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Shannon, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Lori.
Absolutely. I'll come in behind you.
Sure. So, when Carson and I were chatting through this, a couple of things, come to my mind when we think about where we've been and where we're going. And I think if we think about the macro around value creation, soft skills, which I love to call power skills, those are things that help us to necessitate work. So in the industrial age, how we necessitated work has changed dramatically to where we're at today in the knowledge age. We have to connect with one another. We have to unite. We have social systems that we need to work within in order to get things done. And so when you think about the design component, and you think about people in the industrial age, right, we're resources and capital, and we still kind of refer to people in that way. But in the knowledge age, or the digital age where we're at today, people truly are the value enabler to organizational capability and true valuation. And it is, back to Carson's point, is unlocking the potential of the capability that people have within the system of an organization. And when you can do that in unison, it generates high performing people, high performing teams. And so it isn't a soft skill. I mean, I can't remember how you coined it, Carson, but this operating principle, it truly is an operating principle. It's a power principle to help us to generate organizational value in a way that isn't depleting the human resources, it's activating the human resources in our organization to something greater than the individual, and frankly, greater than the whole in the way that we see it now. And I think we're just tapping into whatever that potential is and what that might mean. That's the 3.0, as I think about it and where we're going, we're tapped into this digital construct in the knowledge age. But I truly believe that where we're heading, is somewhere just incredible in regards to the way that people show up and how we collectively start to frankly change the world and operate in a way that brings full circular value to not only organizations, but to our earth and the things that we need to be focused on as a human race. And those are the things that, by the work we're doing today, I think we're going to impact that as we move forward.
Maybe so.
Yeah, so I agree.
And
Yeah,
Derek,
sorry.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
no,
Lori. Go ahead. I just want
oh,
to
you
say
sure? No,
a couple things
please,
on this point.
please.
So one is, I completely agree that compassion's in what I'll call an integral skill, right? It's that essential, it's the power law component. But I think it's important to also give voice to what we experienced when we were together again, just for a moment, because it's important to think about IQ, we think about emotional intelligence, we think about adaptability quotient and other components. But we're talking about compassion, which is in essence, a non-secular or even a spiritual skill that is now moving into an environment that is truly secular. In fact, the point we're building metrics around something that is a truly humanistic thing at its core level. I mean, I think it's important to mention, like, I invite this for all of you. We defined what is empathy, the idea of connecting with someone where they are, sharing in that experience, that emotionality. What is compassion? The recognition of suffering, the desire to serve and help and support and sit with someone in that. We're bringing that concept fundamentally into a model or a workplace or a system that historically, to your point, has not embraced that. Right? That's something that's the disruptive element of this. We're bringing something that is essential to our humanity, independent of business, because we all agree that business is fundamentally about people. Business is fundamentally about actualization. It's fundamentally about joy, right? It's fundamentally about helping people to achieve their potential in life. That's the work that we're ultimately doing here. So what we're saying is we're stacking in something that's been in some ways ignored or placed over here, and we're now bringing it into the mainstream of the work that we're doing. I mean, I think it's really important for that to be said, because that's the real work that we're doing that I think people in their souls and their hearts, they are yearning for in the workplace.
Yearning, starving. So Derek, I hope to respond to you and to Carson together.
Yeah.
Because I feel that there's something that's so elemental about how we look to the bottom line or to stakeholder and shareholder. What's been said about soft skills, Derek, where you just took us back home to humanity and to what we're starving for in coming into a wholeness and alignment in the workplace and everywhere we go, right? But I want to name that I agree with all of you about soft skills. Jeff, I'm so glad for that you claimed soft skills again, anew, afresh, because the feminine, I feel that the feminine has been stripped out and negated, and again, we've been bifurcated from our wholeness, and so the driving and the striving, like, our softness is our greatest our strength applied in healthy ways, like anything else applied in healthy ways, like the whole of us, the call to drive, the call to rest, the call to be confident, the call to be vulnerable, the call to speak, the call to listen, you know, the all of it. It's the call to wholeness and to our integration and to honor
Yes.
every part of ourselves. And so I wanted to speak to that, and then I want to share just a quick experience. So we've had the privilege of working with a real estate company that is actually four companies, the Massiello Group. They're up here in New England, and they have 37 offices across 3 states: Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And we have been supporting um, the the executive leadership team that started, all the vernacular started to change within their culture, and they started to call themselves the support team. And there's 4 companies under the umbrella of the real estate company: residential, commercial, school, and title company. And across Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, 37 offices. Every single office saw themselves siloed. They saw themselves as one office with a home office. When we started to our learning journeys with them on how to share leadership and share power, and how to start with care for each other, and start, what are the practices of leading with our humanity, and having them in learning journeys where they were practicing these things in everything that they did and how they met. You know, that's for another podcast. But I want to say that, Carson, to your point, or to your question, that they first did a 17-week learning journey. And I'm telling you, by week 5, the roof came off the place for the maturation that started to happen. Because, and Jeff, with what you said too about Daniel Goleman's work, and the mistrust, or the fear of this, like, we're afraid that we're going to need therapy at work if we get emotional, right? We don't trust our maturity. The power over and under creates keeping us like children in a way that is unhealthy for children's natural organic growth into maturation. I find that when we become, in my experience, when groups start to practice care and compassion, leading with their humanity, applied to their work, in their day-to-day, not on retreat, but in their day-to-day workplaces, we mature almost overnight. It's stunning to me. And then the genius that we start to access, right? People putting up gratitude walls, care for each other, like, you know, people that were having trouble with each other, like coming back directly instead of going to the water cooler talk, you know, like having the direct conversations, becoming braver with each other, taking more responsibility for themselves. And then after we did a 17-week learning journey on this experience on a platform that they use, everyone in the company, for the first time ever, across 87 employees, they did a business planning, sharing leadership learning journey. And because they had taken the 17-week learning journey, all these people, the person who handled all the facilities, every single person was responsible for setting the financial goals and the strategic thoughts for the company for the first time in practice. And because they had started to cultivate their humanity and care for each other, they helped each other. They were able to say that they were scared, or that they didn't know what they were doing financially. They became a learning community. That they shift from experts to learners, and to co-creation and co-participation. And now, with the market that even fell out for a while in real estate, Chris Massiello, the CEO, said that they built the muscles to handle change. That they have built the inner muscles of their humanity to handle and be co-creative, and to even handle the hard news of change and the fear of change. And so it has created a developmental culture that you know, over time, I absolutely believe contributes to the bottom line.
One thing I'd like to add, if you don't mind me jumping in, Derek, is that I think there's a tendency for people who may be listening to think the answer that we're proposing, the answer is bring compassion everywhere. And maybe that is the answer. But I do want to make the point that it's not easy. that
Thank you.
what we're proposing has a lot of challenges associated with it, which is why it's not just about let's share with one another, let's sit in a circle. I mean, those are building blocks. Those are aspects of what we're trying to describe here. But it's important to also meet people where they are, because we have a variety of different individuals. I facilitated a session recently for our diversity, equity, and inclusion chairs, our employee network chairs, and everybody interprets things in very different ways. And it's not just based on race or sex or age or whatever it might be. So we have to meet people where they are. And sometimes words like compassion need to be replaced with words like resilience, because that's where people are in the process. And we also, while I think this is less of a risk, we do need to recognize that in the case of a business, we're here to make money. So it's possible to potentially go too far, in creating what some may say, hey, I'm not equipped to do therapy at work. Well, you shouldn't be doing therapy at work. But I think we're so far in the other direction that my proposal is we just need to crack that door open a little bit, and it's going to make an exponential difference to us. But let's not kid ourselves about how difficult it is and the change management required to make it happen.
Shannon,
quite
do you want
a
to chime in on
great
that, or Carson? Either of you want to chime in on that?
I have something to add, but I'll wait for Shannon if she has something she'd like to share.
No, please, Carson, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to underscore both what Lori and Jeff said, and to clarify too, when I say compassion isn't a soft skill, what I mean by that is that it is phenomenally difficult to be compassionate in that sense, because if my own experience, in order to be compassionate, you have to be self-compassionate. So in order to do that, there's a fair amount of work and strength that has to come forward first. So it's kind of a, how to say, I'm not sure the right frame here, but it's not a soft skill in the sense that it takes formidability to be able to deliver that soft skill, if you will. So it's not soft in the sense of weak, it's soft in the sense of overflowing strength. And it's not, I think to Jeff's point too, it's not about, sitting in a circle and, everything's magical, all this. That's not the case at all. The work is very difficult, but I think the reality of it is, and I really love how Lori framed this. This is the first time I've heard her say this, although she's probably said it before, but it's gotten through to me, is this notion that in doing the work and moving away from this hierarchical structure, we do move from being thought of and treated like children to being adults, and being able to meet with each other as adults who do the work on ourselves that's necessary, so that other adults can do the work on themselves, and then collectively we can produce and create great things. But if everyone is in this childless or this childlike, being framed in this manner, people aren't willing to look at themselves, and they're hunching over and they're not doing that work, then the individuals, the teams, and the organizations will be very, very limited. So, and again, also to Jeff's point too, work is not a place for therapy either. So it is finding that space of where we're adults and we have empathy and we treat each other with humanity. And at the same time, we do hold space for ourselves outside of work, where we need to do other sorts of things. So I just appreciate the opportunity to clarify and build on both of their thoughts, because I think it was absolutely spot on.
Carson, I'm so glad that you brought up explicitly the concept of self-compassion, because I do believe that's foundational in terms of our ability to grow and develop and take risks and learn from mistakes. I mean, we have to hold ourselves in self-compassion. We have to be able to be in a conference room, be called on and say, I don't know, and be okay with that, and come back with an answer later, or, I process differently than you do. So that's okay. I'm not going to convince myself that I need to be an extrovert in order to be successful. So I think really treating yourself with self-compassion is such the important starting point.
Yeah. And Jeff, I can't wait to read your book. I'm so grateful that you're writing a book on, honestly, on self-compassion, honestly. And we, here we say self to other to system. Nothing is excluded. that we,
Mhm.
that again, we're so multidimensional within ourselves and again, within a system, right? So how can we be awake to our self-care, the cultivation of our own maturity and compassion, as one aspect of our wholeness and self-care, our relationships with each other, how are we responsible, and for those, and to the health of the system that we've been called to show up in at work, that how do we hold respect, dignity, care, responsibility in all directions. And then there is, the need for therapy is there always, right? Whether we're doing this work of bringing in compassion and humanizing the workplaces or not, it's just that without it, to me, we're so it's worse. The toxic, but that's where it can become so toxic and trauma because it stays underground.
Yeah.
That, as we give ourselves the air and the space and work at this with consciousness and intention. And as you say, I just want to, we do know each other, so I hope this isn't too inappropriate. Although I know this on a friendship level, but I just would want to give you a hug for what you said about it being hard because it's so important. But what is it in life in a way, and what would we rather be doing? I'll end it there for me, you know, on my deathbed, and I look at my own legs. What, where do I want to have given my time? Because it is hard and it's painful and uncomfortable at times, but oh my gosh, it's also the treasures for people,
Yeah.
and for work.
Well, I feel like we've just literally scratched this conversation, literally, and we're wrapped up here. So we could literally spend 2 days together, which we have. And I would encourage those who are here and watch this to get involved in the compassion community and work we're doing. I know there'll be information about the events of the future and the different work that we're doing in the Compassion 2.0 community that will be available. One last thing I'll just share before I wrap up is I don't think I've ever shared this on Rebels, but it's relevant. And it's also because Shannon, you're here and you work with a company called Waste Management. The very first job that I wanted to have as a young child was I wanted to be a garbage man. I wanted to be in the waste management business. And I was sincere about it, really was, because what I saw in those guys when I was a young kid, I was probably 3 years old, was that there's just an essence of that they were showing up and they were doing that work and they were having fun together. They were playing with their colleagues and they're in that moment and they're literally taking out the trash. And the reason why I bring this up is because in the scheme of what we're doing together, there's nothing wasted, right? All of this that we're experiencing, those lessons, those traumas, those moments, that discomfort is all serving a purpose in the sense it's being digested in the whole. It's nurturing us, it's fertilizer, right? And so it's so fascinating that just kind of came up when you were introduced. I wanted to share that. It felt inspired. So I hope that this session has been helpful to our audience. I appreciate and love each of you, and I'm grateful that you're here. And I'm really just honored and privileged to do this work with all of you. So thank you for being on Rebels of the Heart. Welcome officially to our community. And I'm excited to work we're going to be doing together. So thank you.